This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.
Well, it's been a sad time in the Valley of the Sports, and last night was a sad night. We're watching Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, and we think, why can't that be us? Why can't that happen in the desert? Why can't we have nice stuff? Our hockey team moved to Salt Lake City, and the Florida Panthers, who have had kind of a run like the Coyotes, have been on the ascent, and we don't have a hockey team, and professional hockey appears to be dead in the desert, at least for the time being. So let's bring in a man who has been all over this story and broke the news late last night that Alex Meruelo and the Coyotes ownership group will no longer pursue a deal to buy land in the desert to build a hockey arena. The one, the only, Craig Morgan from PHNX. Craig, how many interviews have you done today?
This is number 5.
5. What there was the late night article last night that really, I mean, it went national, and it was during the celebration. We're sitting there looking up and seeing Keith Tkachuk, the former Coyote captain, in tears that his son had won the Stanley Cup, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson skating around with the cup. And then as great of a job it was as you do, it was kind of tough to read your story. So we've kind of been able to digest this now. Fair to say professional hockey is dead in the desert for the time being.
Well, definitely for the time being, with Alex Meruelo deciding not to pursue any more arena options after the Arizona State Land Department canceled the auction that was supposed to be held this Thursday. There's no immediate path forward. It's going to be a process. As Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley told me a while ago when I floated the hypothetical that what happens if Alex Meruelo leaves? And I knew I had to ask Bill Daley this, by the way, because Gary Bettman hates hypotheticals. He won't answer them. But Bill Daley did answer him. He said, well, then they become like any other expansion city, which is, it's hard to hear, right? Because you almost hope that Arizona would get a little bit of preferential status based on all the suffering that we have endured over the years with the Coyotes. But the process is what it is, so we'll have to wait. Once the NHL officially announces this, Mark, which they haven't done yet, then all of that will come out. They'll answer all those questions. I assume Gary Bettman will do so at the draft this weekend, and we'll get a better sense of what's coming next for this market.
All right, so if we read your article on PHNX and on your Twitter and all of your social media.
The website's down right now, Mark.
Oh, I just was reading it. I have it. It might be back.
Good.
Yeah,
I'm happy to hear that.
I have it right here. Yes, you should tweet back out the link. And
crashed the website for a while.
I'm sure it did. I mean, this was all over. I mean, every late night show last night was talking about this. This was on. There was some college football sites talking about this. So it appears that Alex Meruelo Jr. met with members of the organization and basically said, "We're done. We're not going to pursue this." Is this kind of your sense of how this shook down?
Yeah, that happened yesterday at the offices for the remaining staff, right? There were some pretty significant layoffs that occurred before this, but for the remaining staff, they told them a couple things that I heard. They're not going to pursue this anymore. And we could talk a little bit about why that is, but I think they finally got a pretty good grasp of how the market feels about them, how the public feels about them. They're tired of the attacks, so they're bowing out with whatever money they happen to make out of this deal, which was a significant number.
Right, and I mean that's it's their business, and they can choose how to run it however they want. But when you are in the public like this, and you do have a public trust like a professional sports franchise, I mean you've been very critical. I've been very critical. How do you feel? Why do you feel like we got to this point?
Well, there's a lot of pieces here, but I do think that the way that Alex operates is a big part of the problem here. How he made his money was by purchasing distressed assets. The way you make those profitable again is you take a look at your creditors and you squeeze them. Say, I'm not going to pay you the full amount I owe you. I'm going to pay you this. You can sue me if you want, or we can just settle on this amount. And that's what he did. He did that throughout his business, and he turned these things around. He had great success turning around a bunch of distressed assets, distressed businesses. But when, as you mentioned, you enter into this sphere, this very public arena, everything that you do, first of all, is scrutinized, and you need relationships to move forward with the types of projects we're talking about. You want to build an arena that's going to be in City of Phoenix boundaries? Well, you better make friends with the City of Phoenix. You better make friends with a bunch of the stakeholders who are going to help you get this done. And it didn't seem like he ever learned that lesson. He just thought that he could just bull his way through everything the way he had done in past businesses, and it ended up costing him the franchise.
Why do you think he didn't hire a zoning attorney?
Well, I mean, they had a different interpretation. If you go on the city of Phoenix zoning and read the language of it, I mean, honestly, Mark, you and I would be like, I really don't know what that says.
That's why I majored in journalism right there.
So it's open, yeah, it's open to interpretation, and I can understand how they might think, yeah, it does allow for an arena, but you knew a long time ago that the city of Phoenix was saying, no, it's not. Now, the process for getting a special use permit, I've been told, is really long. It's like 8 to 10 months. So when you got Gary Bettman in your ear saying, I need an answer by April, you don't have enough time to go get that permit. So maybe Alex, and I don't know this for certain, but maybe Alex decided, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to go try and get the land, and then we'll work out the permit afterward. It is a big risk, but when you're under the gun in terms of timing, that's a possibility for why he took this approach.
Is this the, I guess, worst example of leadership in Arizona sports history, in your opinion? It isn't mine.
I mean, they lost the franchise. That's a pretty big check mark in the con column, isn't it? I mean, I know it's the NHL, so it's not as big a deal as it's harder to lose an NFL franchise, although it's happened usually by the owner's request rather than by just screwing it up. Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to find something worse than this. I mean, we have a pretty recent example of a bad actor in Robert Sarver, but to lose a franchise I just feels like he betrayed the entire public trust here, Mark, and lost the franchise, lost one of the crown jewels of the city in terms of the sports landscape. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that.
And you look at the news conference towards the end of the season, at the end of the season with Gary Bettman, and he said he intended to win the land auction, and that didn't happen. And there was the intent to build a new arena in Tempe, that didn't happen. At some point, was because you heard different things about. There was no effort really made to get out the vote. They didn't invest in Tempe in trying to win that vote. They just sort of. Maybe not the bare minimum, but it certainly wasn't a major push to show what that arena in Tempe on the landfill could actually have done for the community. Do you feel like the effort was there from this ownership group to really make this happen, or potentially, one of my thoughts is that this could have just been an investment the entire time, and they won because they won the investment?
I don't think so. I don't think that's what it was. I think it was there was a desire to get things done, but the execution was so poor in so many instances. That deal that they had with Tempe, I've had so many people, and I agree. I mean, you had 7 city council members on board. You had major business leaders on board. That was a good deal for the city of Tempe, in spite of what Tempe First was telling you with the misinformation that they were spreading. That was a good deal for the city of Tempe. They were going to pay for the cleanup of a dump site, which is going to become a problem for that city. But you get that far, you have this incredible deal structured, and then you go cheap on the campaign. Just hire professionals, run the type of campaign that you need to run, learn who your electorate is, right? Who's going to actually turn out and vote in a special election, and start messaging to those people instead of saying, we're going to create the Rodeo Drive of Arizona in Tempe. Like, hello, read the room. That doesn't play at all in this community. It's just like when they got to the end game, they were just clueless. They made just such bad decisions when they were so close to closing that deal. And I think that more than anything is what precipitated the end of the Coyotes. When they blew the Tempe deal, they were on borrowed time at that point.
And right now, your report is the report of record when it comes to the news that this is happening. I've had different conversations with people at the Coyotes who have talked about the meeting that Alex Meruelo Jr. had with the staff, informing them that the land deal is not going to happen. But when do you think this becomes official, that Gary Bettman actually acknowledges what you were reporting, and the Coyote franchise, as we know it, will no longer exist, at least not for in the near future?
It's really tough to say, because I know that Gary doesn't like this sort of news to steal the thunder from marquee events. We had Game 7 last night. We have the draft later this week. But there is a Board of Governors meeting this week, and Gary knows he's going to be hammered with questions on this. A lot of people are going to want to know what comes next for Arizona. So I would hope that they would announce it around the draft, maybe before the draft. who knows what the league's thinking. The other side of this to consider, of course, is the legal side. Do we know all the details of that arrangement and what it takes for Alex Meruelo and the league to extricate themselves from each other? That may play into this as well. So it's really hard to predict, but I would hope that it would come before the 4th of July at the latest. They need to address this.
Well, and you read your article, and there's a link inside the article about the Atlanta Thrashers potentially reactivating their own franchise and buying land or having land pinpointed to build an arena. So that makes you think, okay, if Atlanta could potentially come back as an expansion franchise, Phoenix, if somebody could get their act together here, it could reactivate here. What does that path look like? I know the Coyotes haven't even been dead for 24 hours, but what does the path look like to the Coyotes rising from the grave?
Yeah, it's tough because you need the arena. That's the key piece. I mean, no, the key piece is the ownership group, right? We need a serious ownership group, and I don't know if we'll even have a sense of whether the groups are serious or not until we get into that process. It's easy to say I have interest, but then, okay, are you willing to spend the money? What sort of relationships do you have within the city? And then a couple of years down the road, are you in fact a decent ownership group? Because we thought Alex Meruelo was the savior at one point, and that didn't go so well. But if you get that group together, and hopefully you have those relationships, you have key people. I think it's important to have key people on the ground. Say Shane Doan, for instance, involved, because he's hockey royalty. He has a lot of goodwill in this community and good relationships. If you can get that part done, then you need to build an arena. It's the same issue that they've had for so long. You have to get an arena built, and you have to get it built in a political climate where nobody wants to do you favors via taxes or any other sort of subsidies. So it's a tough process. It's really hard to predict how that will play out.
Where would you build the arena if you could pick any spot in the Valley right now? Where would hockey work in the desert?
I mean, you could go back downtown, but you'd have to. I don't think the city of Phoenix would allow that unless Matt Ishbia were the owner of both teams. And I honestly don't see that happening. I know some people would like to see that, at least not in the short term. I don't think Matt Ishbia is interested in being an NHL owner. But the Tempe site was amazing, Mark. It was a spectacular site. It was centrally located, 5 minutes from the airport, 10 minutes from downtown, on the east side of town, close to the population base, the wealth base, and the corporate base. And it would solve Tempe's problem that they still haven't solved. They have a dump that's going to have to be cleaned up. I loved that site. It needs to be close to the core of the city, but probably slightly east. So I would say along that 101 corridor, maybe you go back to the reservation if you can solve those issues, and talk to the Salt River Pima Maricopa tribe and see if that land might be available. But it's got to be somewhere in that vicinity. I think that's the best area for a team.
You never age, and I've been on TV and doing interviews with you since, I don't know, the mid-2000s. I feel like I'm going to be a very old man by the time professional hockey returns here to the desert. If you had to forecast, if you will, since it was raining last night, and I know you were watching the forecast as you were trying to do your show at home and keep your internet working, when could you see, if things line up, a team coming back to Arizona?
Okay, a couple things to say here. I don't think it's coming in within 5 years. I always thought that was a pipe dream. If you look at the history of teams that have left markets and then come back in the NHL, Minnesota was the fastest, and that happened in 7 years. And that's called state of hockey. Hockey's a big deal up in Minnesota, as you know. So I keep that in the back of my mind, understanding that this is a lengthy process. But there's the side of me that thinks Gary Bettman's not going to be around that much longer as NHL commissioner. He's 72 years old. And I think this is a little bit personal to him. So I can't help wondering if Uncle Gary's going to try and do the Valley a solid one more time before he moves on. So I don't know when he's planning on retiring. He still loves working at age 72, but he can't stick around that much longer. Maybe Gary will try and fast track this behind the scenes if he can get the right ownership group.
And we would celebrate Gary Bettman Appreciation Day right here. He could come in here and we would celebrate it. We would throw him a party. Do you have any sense if a franchise were able to come back to the desert, if it could be named the Arizona Coyotes? Or, some of us have thought that name is cursed, as cool as the logo is. You should just start from scratch.
Yeah, my understanding, and I need to do more reporting, I need to clarify this with the league, is that once Alex steps out, he loses the rights to the Coyotes and they become available again. Look, if Shane Doan's affiliated with a new group, I think we'll see the Coyotes come back because it means something to Shane. If it's another group, I could completely understand them just wanting to wipe the slate clean, say, let's start fresh. It's a great logo and a great name, but there's a whole lot of bad juju around the Coyotes, so maybe we should choose a different nickname.
I would choose the Firebirds.
That's number one on my list, literally.
Yes. Yeah.
Crazy.
It'd be great.
I love it.
Yeah.
And it works from a thematic standpoint, right, too, rising from the ashes. After all that had gone before here, they're back. They've come back from the dead. I love it.
Done. 7 years from today.
All right, we've solved
the Phoenix
it, Mark.
Firebirds. We have it's either that, the Donors, or the Fighting Morgans. So I'm going to put that in the suggestion box as well.
Like the third choice at all.
Well, I know you've been busy. I know you have another article to write right now. So give us a tease. Where can we find that article? And what else are you sort of zeroing in on with this story as we lay the Coyotes in their grave?
Yeah, it's about what comes next. That's not necessarily what I'm working on right now because, as you know, I'm kind of become the Cardinals beat writer as well. So I'm working on a Cardinals story, but you can find all of my work at gophnx.com. And yes, I will continue to keep an eye on the NHL in Arizona. Hopefully we'll have a team back for fans because, man, nobody deserves it more than Coyotes fans.
Yep. Preach. Very true. Real quick. Is that a cup of Cardinal Kool-Aid next to you? Or are you drinking the June Kool-Aid that this team could compete?
It's a little early for me to be drinking Kool-Aid. I am intrigued, though. I am intrigued by the pieces on offense and the new vibe. I wrote a story recently just looking at how many coaches in this league, even with this franchise, get a bump in year 2 or year 3. There's just this vibe. And when you have the right pieces, if you have quarterback play, you can do something. I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl, but they could be a playoff team. I would not be surprised if the Cardinals were in the playoffs this year.
Hey, we are here for that, and we're going to need it with one less professional sports team here to cover in the Valley of Sports. Well, Craig, thank you for your time as always. We know it's been a busy 24 hours here, and keep up the great work.
All right, buddy. Always great talking to you.
This is The Extra Point, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast, sponsored by your Phoenix Suns.